Thank you very much, Patrice, for sharing some of the insights into the great work you're doing in Evergreen in tackling your plastic challenges. It's really fantastic to have Evergreen on board the Responsible Plastic Management Program. Well, everyone, if I could ask you just to hold off your questions until the end of the session, we'll have time for Q&A then for each of our presentations. Now, I'm going to move on to the next presentation, which is going to be delivered from myself. I'm Dave Garforth. I work for the RPM program, and I'm going to say a few words about plastics in the seafood sector. Now, we deliver more detailed content on a sector-by-sector basis, actually, including in seafood, which would give more detailed analysis of some of the issues and challenges within each of these sectors, including seafood. Here, I'm just going to say a few words about some of the particular issues and solutions that the seafood sector is advancing. Well, just like all sectors, plastic is hugely important in seafood. It's important in the catching sector. For example, fishing gear, predominantly made out of plastics, highly engineered plastics, but also plastics of many different types as well. In the seafood processing environment, whilst establishments may be made of bricks and mortar, once you step inside, you usually find two different types of material. One is stainless steel, the other one is plastics, of course, and plastics of all different types and sizes and shapes. Why? Because it's hugely versatile, it's hygienic, it's cleanable. In other words, it's food grade, hence it's used in packaging, as we all know, it's used in PPE, so hugely important to the industry. Of course, packaging, I've just mentioned, EPS, expanded polystyrene, an important plastic for seafood as in other foods. Why? Well, it's insulative, it's lightweight, it's robust, it holds the product well, so hugely important to the industry. And indeed in aquaculture and fish farming, because plastic essentially floats, it's used extensively in the aquaculture industry. And it's for seafood, it's hard to imagine how this industry would survive without, this material called plastic as a function, as a material it can use in all these different types of forms. However, like most sectors, there are challenges, and seafood is no different from that. And these are just some pictures, some photographs which help to explain some of those challenges. Well, fishing gear, as I've explained, it's highly technically advanced. It contains lots of different polymers, different plastics, in other words. But not only that, it contains other materials such as metals, such as steel, such as lead, because it sinks. It's used in sinking lines, hard plastics, soft plastics, and of course, at its end of life, end of use, it's also highly contaminated because it's full of organic matter. It's also impregnated with salt. These things make it highly challenging to both dismantle, to decontaminate, and to find recycling solutions for fishing gear, which can be cost effective. The other issue around fishing is, of course, these gears are placed in the water, and they can sometimes get sagged and they get lost in the marine environment. That causes a phenomenon called ghost fishing, or can lead to ghost fishing, whereby they continue to fish and trap fish, but also marine mammals and birds and other wildlife. Also, they wash up on shorelines, of course, which is not just an eyesore, but an environmental nuisance as well. So these things cause a reputational risk to the industry. Then there's this thing called microplastics as well, which everybody's familiar with at this point in time. And we're not suggesting that the seafood industry is responsible entirely for microplastics. It's not. Microplastics is a societal challenge. However, because of course seafood is associated with the marine environment and microplastics is associated with marine pollution, the seafood industry is quite vulnerable to the impacts, to reputational issues surrounding microplastics. And you add to that, of course, the new and emerging science about the fate of microplastics in ecosystems, particularly in food chains, in marine food chains, which eventually become human food chains, and the unknown certainties about whether that is a health hazard or not, creates another challenge for this industry. Then we look at packaging. EPS, as I mentioned earlier, fantastic product. However, because it is lightweight, because it is bulky, it means it's challenging to find solutions at its end of life. And because it's contaminated, it's contained food, it's difficult to decontaminate as well. So challenges just like other sectors. So what about some of the solutions? What can be done about this? Well, at the RPM program, what we're doing is advancing solutions by assisting businesses at an organizational level or a sector level get organized by undertaking things like a baseline review, collecting information about their own use patterns of plastic. And it really starts in terms of identifying what type of plastics are used. And this table just gives some examples of the different polymers, some of which you'll be familiar with, I'm sure, used in this industry. And some of them are common to all sectors, and all society, such as low-density polyethylene, polythene bags, in other words, films and wrapping and these types of things, and enormously important for the industry in terms of wrapping and protecting food. However, quite a challenging plastic in that format to find recycling solutions because it is contaminated again, and because it's lightweight and difficult to bulk up, even though LDPE is a very recyclable plastic. In the fishing industry as well, they use some unique plastics such as ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene, this one here, which is used in fishing gears, and these are brand names of this type of plastic, Dyneema and Spectra. Fantastically super materials. They're 10 times stronger than steel in some formats. They're 10 times lighter than steel in formats, which means when you put these on board a fishing vessel, it becomes lighter, which means it uses less fuel, which means it saves energy, which means it produces less carbon. So there's environmental benefits in plastic, as well as, of course, the detrimental side we're talking about of how to manage it at its end of life. So the ability to communicate significance of plastics is really important, and undertaking reviews is really important. And this diagram really just gives a conceptual representation of a seafood sector. It's different components: fishing, aquaculture, packing, retail, food service. So these types of things could be done at a group level, at an organizational level, or indeed at a full sector level, where the businesses can collect the information about the different types of plastics based on polymers, in other words, that they're using, and start to look at what that footprint looks like over a course of time of maybe a 12-month period. It's usually important to collect this information, of course, and to close those gaps in information and understand, what that data represents and what is it saying to us. So if you don't do this, what happens if you've got gaps? Well, that's when any sector is open to accusation and criticism. Whether those accusations and criticisms are true or false, it's difficult to defend if you don't know the facts yourself. So moving on quickly to some of the solutions, and these are just some quick examples I'm giving here. So fishing industries in Europe and other parts of the world are getting organized themselves. They're going out and actually fishing for litter, not just their own fishing gear that may have been lost, but everybody's, all society's litter is now collected by fishermen when they encounter it in the nets. So they're acting as stewards, environmental stewards in their environments, and demonstrating that commitment to society. There's a lot of work done around technology and fishing gear as well, of course, in terms of reducing their complexity, making them easier to recycle, and that's creating recycling solutions as well. And here's one on the bottom left. It's a company in Denmark. It's also vitally important for businesses to get organized and work together and bulk up materials. And it allows them to create dedicated recycling stations for themselves. And this is an example in Iceland, actually, where the fishing industry comes together. It collects its nets, it dismantles them in a dedicated center, it decontaminates them, and it prepares them to be sent for recycling. And that happens across all the plastics they utilize, including the SUPs, if you wish, the plastic packaging, EPS, and collect that and have that bulked up as well. There's projects on in Europe on looking at closed loop systems for recycling EPS, which are now delivering a recycled EPS through a closed loop system after analyzing the situation. And that means economic analysis, social analysis, environmental analysis to find a solution that works and produces a recycled polymer that is actually attractive on the marketplace. and which is of course important to find solutions. It's got to be a business case. It's got to be viable. Okay, well, I'm going to end my presentation there. Thanks very much for listening, and thanks for your interest. As I said, we'll take some questions at the end. Before I close, I just would like to give an invitation to our next guest speaker, which is Jacqueline Gibson. Jacqueline works for Belfast Harbour Commissioners, and she's going to present a few slides on how the Belfast Harbour is becoming a clean green port and how plastic is a part of that. Jacqueline, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.